Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. For today's episode I want to propose to you another important subject entitled Fundamentalism, Church's Last Line of Defense. My guest today is again Professor Hovorun. Professor Hovorun, welcome back to my channel and it is a real pleasure to have you back.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Today, I'm going to ask my guest some related questions as a case study about fundamentalism and how it is manifested, especially in the Russian Orthodox Church, in its internal and external affairs. It is a study case, let's say, on which Professor Horovorun is very much experienced because he is an Ukrainian and he's affected by the war, and in the same time he served. I don't know exactly if I'm saying correct this, but from what I know, he served as a priest inside the Moscow Patriarchate. Correct me if I'm wrong here.
Yes, I used to be a priest there.
So you know very well the Russian Church. You know very well also the Ukrainian Church. So I think we may learn from you a lot of good things about fundamentalism if we make this study case about the Russian Orthodox Church. So without further ado, I want to ask you the first question. A question that comes from Romanian people who don't believe that the Russian Orthodox Church is involved in the Ukrainian war. So I think you can help us to understand if it is involved. So the first question is Russian Orthodox Church involved in the war started by Putin against Ukraine? If so, what does this involvement consist of?
Well, it's enough to listen to the statements by Patriarch Kirill of Moscow, to the speeches, declarations made by various bishops, theologians of the Russian Church to realize that the Russian Orthodox Church is deeply, profoundly involved into this war. It supports every side of this war. And I would say that in many points, the Russian Orthodox Church is even more supportive to the war than many people in the Russian society, secular people in the Russian society. The Russian Orthodox Church has provided this war with some kind of ideology or theology supporting this war. Well, Putin and his cronies could be seen as like predators trying to, grab the land, grab the people. They acted like this, for example, during the war in Georgia in 2008. In 2008, Russia just occupied a part of Georgia without any pretension to having, any sacred war or any explanation, any excuse which would go beyond, just the desire to punish the Georgian government at the time of Saakashvili, to punish the Georgian people for wanting to stay away from Russia. That was it. It was very raw, very plain expansionism. Desire to grab land and to occupy people. In Ukraine, they do the same. They grab lands, they occupy lands, but they try to rationalize it. They try to explain this occupation by various theological reasons, by various references to the divine, to the transcendent. And the Russian Church provides the Russian government, Putin's regime, with such explanations. The Russian Church essentially tries to transform a purely, occupational desire to occupy land, to steal land, tries to transform it into a noble cause, that it is done for, some very important spiritual, theological, divine reasons. Recently, the Russian speakers of the Russian church stopped hesitating calling this war a sacred war. So for them, it is a sacred war. This term, for the first time, was used by an official speaker of the Russian Orthodox Church, who passed away now, Father Vsevolod Chaplin, who called the Russian invasion to Syria and Russia's support to the regime of Bashar al-Assad, he called it a sacred war. Now they apply the same term to Ukraine. So the Russian church is deeply involved into this war. The Russian church is justifying this war, every side of this war. And moreover, I am afraid, this is of course very speculative, but I guess that even after the war is over, the Russian Orthodox Church will continue, romanticizing this war, will continue theologizing this war, which is really, which is very dangerous, I think. And I should say that this war is underpinned to a great extent ideologically by fundamentalism. Let me explain why and how it is happening. Well, fundamentalism is usually defined as a reaction of religious communities to modernization, to modernity. Fundamentalism is not something, particularly Christian, even though as a term, fundamentalism emerged in the United States in application to the Baptist evangelical communities in the United States. And first, the American Baptists were happy to be called fundamentalists. That was a reference to the foundations, to the fundamentals of their faith. Well, we all, as Christians, we all have fundamentals, something which is fundamental for us. Well, in this broad sense, we could be called fundamentalists, and we would be happy to be called fundamentalists. But approximately in the mid-20s, 1920s, in the United States, especially after the so-called monkey trial, when there was a hearing in the Supreme Court of the United States regarding the possibility of teaching Darwinism in some schools in the United States, when the course, which was supported by Baptists, some at least Baptist groups in the United States, their support received a very bad press, and the word fundamentalism in application to those religious Christian fundamentalists, as we call them now, received a very bad connotation. So it became like a bad word. And it continues to be. However, numerous studies which have been done regarding fundamentalism, they have established that fundamentalism is really a universal phenomenon. It's universally, it can be seen in different religious traditions. There are like Muslim fundamentalists, Hindu fundamentalists, Buddhist fundamentalists, and so forth. Generally speaking, and the scholars identify fundamentalism as a reaction of within religious communities to the processes of modernization and secularization. In the case of the Russian church, we could speak about very militant, weaponized fundamentalism. Fundamentalism, as in Russia, as everywhere else, including Romania, I assume, exists, and it exists, well, relatively peacefully. People don't kill each other just, for the sake of their ideas. But in Russia, they decided to kill other people in the name of those fundamentalistic ideas. And if you look at the rhetoric of Putin and his cronies, and well, everyone who is contributing to Putinism, to this ideology of Putin, you can distinguish clearly various ideas stemming from fundamentalism. Well, Putin justifies this war as the war against secularism, Western secularism, as the war against the decadence, the corruption of the traditional values, which comes as a part of the process of secularization and the process of modernization of modern societies. Well, this Russian propaganda makes references all the time to the points which are important for the fundamentalists globally. However, the Russian propaganda goes even further than just fundamentalists everywhere. It justifies the war in the name of this fundamentalism. So the war is fought, at least in the Russian eyes, from the perspective of the Russian propaganda and most Russians, it is fought against democracy, against modernization, against secularization, against everything else that other fundamentalists fight against as well. In the Russian church, fundamentalism constituted a minority for a long time. And when Patriarch Kirill was elected the Patriarch of the Russian Church, he was not a fundamentalist. He was really, he was quite in opposition to fundamentalism. He wanted to contain fundamentalism in the church because he started as a very liberal bishop and theologian and hierarch. And he really detested, really didn't like, fundamentalism. But he regarded, at the same time, he regarded fundamentalism as a threat, and he tried to figure out what to do with it. And eventually, he ended up in aligning with fundamentalism. Without believing fundamentalism, he made it an ally. And eventually, I would say fundamentalism took over the church. This minority movement that existed in the Russian church as a minority movement took over the majority of the church. And now the entire church, including the Patriarch, who was very open-minded, very liberal, reproduces the points, the ideas which are dear to fundamentalists. So fundamentalism is dangerous, I believe. Fundamentalism is as dangerous as the war per se, because fundamentalism drives this war in Ukraine. And I think therefore it is important to discuss fundamentalism. There is one more thing that I would like to emphasize, to stress. Quite often, fundamentalism is something that implies a dualistic worldview, an outlook that sees the world in black and white, the outlook that considers evil as something, as like an entity embedded into things around us, and goodness as embedded into other things around us. So, for example, the ancient Gnostics who lived in the first centuries of Christianity, they believed that there were two gods, one good God, another one is bad God, and they created respectively a good part of the world and a bad part of the world. This Gnostic worldview deeply penetrated into Christianity, and Christianity tried to fight it. And actually, the first efforts of the Christian church to contest, to identify heresies were connected with different dualistic worldviews. So I would say that dualism is kind of the ancient, the proto-heresy in Christianity. And Christian theologians really struggle to eradicate this dualistic worldview from the church without complete success, though, because it came back again and again, and it still lives in the churches, in various churches. And it particularly lives in the fundamentalistic groups first, because For them, they think in the categories us and them. Us is like the Church of the Pure, the Church of the Orthodox, and them are those who are secularists, who are, Westerners, those who are bad guys, those who try to, to conquer us, to oppress us. This is the mentality of modern Russia, very much. In this point, fundamentalists converge with the dualists. Because for the fundamentalists, them, the West, the modernists, the ecumenists, and so forth, they are evil forces. They are driven, they're instruments in, devil's hands. They're driven by evil spirits. They are evil per se. And us, as a group, whatever we do, however we behave, we as us, as a community like of the Orthodox, purely Orthodox, we are the embodiment of goodness. We are the executives of God's will, executioners of God's will in this world. And this is exactly how the Russian elites and Russian people and Russian hierarchs, Russian church people, many Russian church people think. They perceive the West as this embodied evil, the dark side of the world that cannot be helped, and Russia as the island of goodness, as the island of light, in this ocean of darkness. And that's why they have this mentality of besieged castle. And that's why they started this war. They believe that they protect themselves. They believe by attacking Ukraine, by killing Ukrainians, they essentially protect themselves from this cosmic evil that surrounds them. This dualistic worldview is very widely spread around Putin. I think Putin himself is a bearer of such a dualistic worldview. Patrick Kirill is quite a dualistic in his outlook. And many others in Russia. Just recently, before we started this conversation, I read an article by a Russian member of parliament, Mr. Ananskih. He published an article in an academic peer-reviewed journal in Russia where he argued that the world is ruled by reptiles, and he argued that the world was created by two gods. The one is the good God and the other one is the bad God, which is a very kind of classically dualistic, absolutely dualistic worldview. And this reflects, of course, Mr. Ananskih is quite radical in his views, but he reflects what many Russians believe, maybe to more moderate extent. They are the followers of this dualistic worldview on the one hand. On the other hand, they also concur with many fundamentalistic points, and these points inspire them to support the war.
You made for us an overview of what fundamentalism is and how he is manifested in Russia. But this overview gave birth to a lot of questions, so we don't have time to answer to all of them. But I want to address some. Going back to my first question, I don't know if it is very important, but I want to ask this. The Romanian people, the Romanian faithful Orthodox who are not believing that the Russian Church is involved in this war, it is possible do not believe because Daniel, the Romanian patriarchs and the Romanian synod is still keeping Kirill in their diptychs.
Yeah.
Or this is my opinion. How can a Romanian Orthodox be convinced that there is a war in Ukraine and this war has some religious, let's say, aspirations or desires?
Yeah.
Given the fact that the spiritual leader in Romania is praying for Kirill when the diptychs are read and followed, let's say, the custom of the Orthodox Church to pray for the patriarchs in other parts of the world who are in communion with the Romanian Church?
Well, it continues to be the practice that all Orthodox churches worldwide commemorate Kirill as the primate of the Russian Church, because no one church has cut communion with the Russian Church. Stopping commemorating Kirill would mean cutting communion with the Russian Church, but the churches don't want. Even the Ecumenical Patriarchate, which is very critical of Kirill, continues commemorating Kirill as the primate of the Russian Church. So that is like a liturgical custom, part of the Orthodox tradition that continues. However, this does not mean, this commemoration does not mean that the churches need to approve what he does. And in the case of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, we see, for example, that Patriarch Bartholomew personally is very critical about the standpoint of the Russian Church, and he's very outspoken regarding Ukraine. Unlike most other Orthodox churches, with really a few exceptions, prefer to keep silent, including the Romanian Church. Well, the Romanian Church made some kind of euphemistic statements, of course, regarding the war. But I think if you compare the standpoint of the Romanian Church, for example, with the standpoint of the Romanian state and the Romanian society, people in the society, Romanian society, the voice of the Romanian Church is relatively silent, as the voices of many other churches are silent. Quite surprising, even though, in the case of the war in Ukraine, an Orthodox people kills another Orthodox people, exterminates another Orthodox people. So we would expect, solidarity from other Orthodox churches when, one of the Orthodox peoples, one of the most numerous Orthodox peoples gets exterminated. There is a genocidal attack on the Ukrainian people from the Russian side. And still the Orthodox worldwide, most of them, keep a blind eye. This is appalling. This is really disappointing. And it demonstrates, I believe, a very fundamental deficiency that we have in the Orthodox world in the terms of social ethics. We are very good in speaking about Jesus' prayer, asceticism, long services, liturgy, and so forth. But our soft point, kind of very weak point, is social ethics. We don't translate our spirituality, our theology into addressing modern issues, including the issue of war, which has affected the Orthodox churches so much. Moreover, I would say that most wars fought in Europe during the last 30 years on the European continent, they were on the Orthodox soil, in the Orthodox countries, and they were underpinned to a great extent by different ideologies stemming from the Orthodox theology and practice. And the Orthodox churches are supposed to be among the first to address these wars. And they, in reality, are among the last to address these wars. And this is, as I said, this is very disappointing. And unfortunately, this applies to the Romanian church as well.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad that you said this about the disappointment that you have in regard to the fact that the other patriarchates are not saying something about what's happened there, and they don't have a position regarding Kirill, who has a position against you. I think your trial was finished.
Well, yes, yes,
And you're finished.
it's over, but it's life is not over for me, certainly.
Of course. Maybe the life begins now for you in different ways. Okay, now I want to condense two questions into one. Let's start from the last one. It is possible that the other patriarchates of the world, Orthodox world, be silent in regard to what Kirill of Moscow is doing because they're afraid of a schism in Orthodoxy and they don't want this. And the second question that comes near here, it is possible that the fundamentalism of the Russian Church to be a continuation of the great schism against the West, knowing the fact that Russia is trying to construct that Ruski Mir, I hope I pronounce correct, the Russian world. Moscow see herself as the third Rome, and has plans, religious plans for the world in this direction. So about the schism, it is possible that these patriarchates not say something because they are afraid of a schism, and is Russians' plans of today something that continues a fight started in let's say 1054 or 1204 against the West? Of course, then it was the religious West. Now is the secular West. But okay, you understand the question.
Yes, that's a very good question indeed. Yes, some hierarchs in the global orthodoxy, they're afraid of the schism. They also are afraid of, for example, recognizing the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, which was granted independence in 2019, beginning 2019, by the Ecumenical Patriarchate. And they say that, well, we don't want to recognize this church in order not to provoke Moscow further. However, I believe this war is going to be a major reason for a major division within global orthodoxy for years to come. Because the war is so deep, it's so painful, it's so tragic, and the churches are so silent about this war that it will come. It will come back. I mean, the war will come, and its effects will come upon the churches sooner or later. So the more the churches are silent, are ignoring this war now, the more they will be dealing with the consequences of this war and their silence regarding this war in the future. So yes, tactically speaking, it's probably better to keep silent in order to avoid divisions now. But strategically, these tactics will cause even more severe divisions and tensions within the global orthodoxy. That's why, yes, some hierarchs could have such explanations for themselves, at least, that we keep silent in order to avoid further divisions. But they planned within the global orthodoxy, a time bomb, which could explode eventually later. And the explosion will, as I said, will be as louder as more belated is the reaction of the Orthodox churches to the war. The Russian Orthodox Church also does makes a lot of effort to prevent the churches from reacting to the war in different ways. I think the Russian Church uses both sticks and carrots to encourage churches to keep silent and to discourage them to speak up. Those are, it can be money, it can be blackmail, it can be all sorts of pressure upon the hierarchs globally, and we already know some cases. They just come up. The cases of corruption, the cases of pressure, the cases of blackmailing of the hierarchs coming from the Russian Church. Against the foreign hierarchs, and the pressure comes from the Russian Church. Also, it should be said that the Russians manipulate very skillfully the old sensitivities of the Orthodox, including, like, for example, the sensitivity to having an Orthodox king, an emperor, because Orthodox lived for most of their history under the shade of the empires. They still want a sort of empire next to them. And Putin gives them this dream of Byzantium, of the revival of Byzantium. I don't remember if I mentioned this in our previous conversation, but I often refer to the words of the famous Romanian Byzantinologist Nicolae Iorga. He was also prime minister under Carol II, I think. And he was also a founder and a leading figure in the Conservative Party in pre-war, interwar in Romania. So Nicolae Iorga, as a Byzantinist, he coined this famous phrase, Byzance après Byzance, Byzantium after Byzantium. And apparently he wanted Romania of his time in the 30s and 1930s to be such a Byzantium after Byzantium. So he had this dream, and a lot of Romanians at the time shared this dream. That's why they supported, of course, the dictatorship of Karl II, and then the legionnaire state before Antonescu. And many Orthodox have the same problem, the same sensitivity. They dream about Byzantium after Byzantium. They want this Byzantium to be reinstated. And they see Putin as such a quasi-Byzantine figure, as such a kind of Basilevs. And as the Romanians supported the dictatorships of Karl II, the legionnaires, the Antonescu, in the name of this Byzance après Byzance, so many Orthodox support Putin in the same name, and they end up in the same situation of supporting the dictatorship. So it leads, those dreams about Byzantium, inevitably, it seems they lead to dictatorships. And this is clearly the case in Putin. In Putin's case.
You said something about the next question, but maybe you can develop it more. My next question was in regard to Putin. Do you see Putin a real Christian, Orthodox Christian, who makes mistakes, or he is just, let's say, a follower of Constantine the Great, who sees Christianity as an opportunity to use the minds of the people, their faith, for the gain of his empire, his wills regarding Russia and the world and so on?
Well, Putin can imagine himself as a second Constantine. Rather, he imagines himself as second Vladimir of Kiev. And many people convince him that he is like those, figures, historical figures. But of course, he cannot be more remote from those originals than he is. Well, Putin is a populist. He's very much a populist theologian, a right-wing, a classical right-wing populist, with the only difference with other right-wing populists across the globe that he started this war, this blood-shedding war. Otherwise, he's a populist, and he uses religion in order to please people, in order to gather this public support in Russia towards his own regime. Constantine was different. Constantine, in contrast actually to his predecessors, because most of the emperors before Constantine, pagan emperors, they were populists. Starting with actually Julius Caesar, he was the first populist. He tried to override the Senate and to appeal directly to the people of Rome, Populus Romanus. And many other emperors after him did the same. Remember Nero, the infamous Nero, who he kills so many Christians. He kills so many Christians to please the people of the city and of the empire. He was a populist par excellence. Constantine was quite different. When he adopted Christianity, Christianity constituted a minority. The majority was pagan. So the majority was against what Constantine tried to do. Moreover, there were so many revolts against him in Rome that he had to leave Rome and to establish a new capital because he was absolutely unpopular in Rome. That was one of the reasons why he moved to Constantinople, because of his unpopularity and because his lack of these populist instincts. That's why they are the opposites, Putin and Constantine, in so many ways. The same is with Vladimir of Kiev. Yes, he had been a pagan, then he adopted Christianity and he went against the majority of his population, which remained pagan in Rusa at the time. So those figures, and Constantine and Vladimir, they were in a sense against the popular trends, against the desire of the majority of the people. And eventually they won, they prevailed, but they prevailed from the situation of minority. Putin just follows the majority, and he tries to shape this majority to support him even more. They are very different politicians, even though Putin may dream of himself, as I said, as the continuator of the previous emperors and kings.
So it were easier for Constantine to have the empire of Putin.
Oh, exactly, yes.
But he didn't had this disadvantage, and as you said, he was forced to move the capital of the empire from Rome, where he tried to build churches and to change the architecture of Rome to get a Christian shape, but he was
Unsuccessfully.
unsuccessfully, yes.
He managed to build churches only on the outskirts of Rome, outside Rome. For
Yeah.
example, the famous Lateran Basilica, which was one of the earliest Constantinian basilicas, which is now in the center of Rome. It used to be on the outskirts. That was the only place that Senate allowed Constantine to use, for the churches. The core of Rome remained pagan.
So he
And
ran from the Senate to Constantinople. 2 points are there. He showed that he's victor over Licinius, and in the same time he could establish there a new capital with Christian administration and Christian
yeah,
architecture and so on. Okay,
yeah.
let's go back to fundamentalism. Are fundamentalists willing to acknowledge the errors and to repent if they are seeing the Bible truth?
It's a very good question. One, fundamentalists are not stupids. It would be a mistake from the perspective of non-fundamentalists to demonize fundamentalists. They are not stupid. They can be educated people, smart people. For example, the traditional American fundamentalists in the 1930s, when this movement was on rise, they sent their kids to study in Harvard, Yale, the best universities of the country, and they received very good education. And some of them left fundamentalism. So education is a key, I think, is a key to a healthier approach to religion, including theological education. I think that's why theological education is crucially important to deal with fundamentalism. And if we look at Russia, in Russia, mostly uneducated people, also theologically uneducated people are the promoters of fundamentalism. Even Patriarch Kirill himself, well, he's not really educated well. He doesn't have formal education at all. I mean, he has some diplomas, but they don't signify, that he is like an educated person. Of course, he understands, he knows a lot of things, but he doesn't have a formal theological formation, which may explain his slipping eventually to this fundamentalism. So theological education is important. General education is important. Studying the Bible is important. Even though the fundamentalists refer to the Bible so much, for them, the Bible is everything. But the attitude to the Bible, the framework, the method they interpret the Bible is fundamentalistic. It's like the literal reading of the Bible. It's the perception of the Bible as a fax sent from God. It's very much it coincides very much with the dominant Muslim perception of Quran, well, historical and nowadays, when of course the Christians don't say that the Bible is coexistent with God, unlike some Muslims who say that the Quran is coexistent, especially in Sunni Islam, that Quran is coexistent, co-eternal with God, with Allah. But fundamentalists are very close to that. They don't see the Bible as a result of the synergy between human beings and God. And I believe this is the right approach to the Bible. It is a result of the synergy between divine and human will. Just like in Jesus Christ, there is a synergy between divine and human will. Christ is an alive word of God, and the Bible is a written Word of God, and both have synergy, this kind of coexistence of two wills, of two elements, human and divine. For fundamentalist, Bible is just the divine element. In this case, if we mention the doctrines of the past, I would say that this is very much a monophysitic attitude to the Bible. Monophysitism, that it was an ancient teaching that implied that Jesus Christ was just God, with his humanity being really diminished to nothing, reduced to nothing. And fundamentalistic approach is monophysitic. It reduces the human element in the Bible. So studying the Bible in its fullness, from the perspective, from the deep theological perspective, may help overcoming fundamentalism, even though fundamentalism refers to the Bible.
What does fundamentalism claims for orthodoxy and humanity? Which are its promises for the world?
Well, usually the outlook of fundamentalists on humanity is very pessimistic. It's very green. That's why, for example, American fundamentalists, including modern American fundamentalists, they're also Calvinists. And Calvinism has a very specific outlook at the human nature as, intrinsically, ontologically alienated, corrupt. It's quite different from, for example, our Orthodox perspective on the human nature, because we believe that the human nature has not been alienated. It remains ontologically the same. It has been affected by sin, of course, and sin still acts in the human nature, but the nature remains the same as it was created by God. I think this kind of wrong Calvinist anthropology leads inevitably somehow to fundamentalism, because fundamentalism sees the human nature as desperate, as hopeless. They cannot trust, human beings, human nature. That's why, and this sort of attitude also happens within Orthodoxy, even though our theology is different from the Calvinist theology. Our anthropology is different, but people just don't know theology of our own tradition, and they just develop their own ideas, strange ideas, which, without knowing them, that concur with ideas like radical Calvinism. So yes, fundamentalism has deep roots in theology. Fundamentalism is wrong theologically, and it is wrong anthropologically in its attitude to the human nature.
Have you saw the documentary The Family? It was broadcast
it's
on
about this
The Family, the group,
American-based.
the Calvinist group that tried to take the control of the power in United States
Well,
of
it's a bit
America.
of exaggeration, I believe, because I know some of those people. Yes, there is, yeah. Well, it's a wide phenomenon when in the United States different religious groups try to lobby their interests through the government. Well, that particular documentary that I saw, it looked like a bit of conspiracy theory, not without, some
truth.
foundations,
Yeah.
some presuppositions, but certainly, well, I believe that well, it's a political conversation now. If you look at the American political culture, it's very much dualistic. It tends to see the world in black and white, and it is inspired from this perspective by this Puritan congregationalist attitude, Calvinist attitude.
Yeah, I asked this because, as you said, there is no smoke without fire. It's a Romanian proverb.
Yeah, we have the same problem. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. And we may see some religious groups trying to take a political power. As for example, I can remember here the book of Malachi Martin. For sure, you know the book, "The Keys of This Blood," the struggle between Russia, capitalist West, and Catholic Church, Rome, to take control over the world. So we see
Yeah.
in his books three religions that are fighting for the control of the world. This means Orthodoxy,
Yeah.
Russia, Catholicism, Rome, and Protestantism, United States. And I think that fundamentalism is involved in these wars. Of course, some wars are military, and some wars are I
Well,
don't
they
know.
call it the culture wars, and the culture
Yes,
was really deep, especially in the United States. Yeah.
yes, for sure. Um, how should an Orthodox faithful believer should relate to fundamentalism when he or she sees this developing in his church?
Well, I think what we experience, what we are seeing is it can be called by, this medieval term reductio ad absurdum, reduction to absurd. When we see that fundamentalism has led to this massacre, to the slaughter in Ukraine, to so many killings, so much bloodshed, one has to question the reasons why this war happened. One has to really to question fundamentalism per se. And I believe fundamentalism has been reduced to absurdum in this war and needs to be revised profoundly and rebuked.
Yeah, I understand. How the Western world is Christian world is seeing what the Russian Church is doing. They are aware of the involvements in the war and the fundamentalist attitude, or they are not aware about this.
Many churches are aware, and many churches are quite outspoken, not Orthodox churches, well, for the majority. And not very much the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church, at least the Holy See, the Vatican tries to kind of be moderate. But at least from my conversations with different church leaders, I could say that they understand pretty well what is going on. They just many of them or most of them hesitate to speak up. Some of them they are very eloquent and very clear regarding the war. I should mention, for example, I already mentioned Patrick Bartholomew as an acting Patrick, as the Patrick who's active, and also the former Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, who has been so much clear, so much outspoken, so much eloquent in criticizing the war, criticizing the church for its input to this war. I should also mention some statements of some European churches, especially Protestant churches in Europe, especially mainstream Protestant churches such as Lutheran churches. They have been very clear about this war. So it varies. Unfortunately, ecumenical organizations such as the WCC, World Council of Churches, is very unclear about this war and has made some confusing statements, to say the least. While some other ecumenical organizations such as CEC, Conference of European Churches, has been more clear about the war, and so the positions vary, and different churches, different ecumenical organizations say different things about this war.
Okay, when we speak about the Orthodox world, we said that it is possible that being afraid of another schism, they need to be silent. But the rest of the world, why do you think they are silent? Because they don't have some gain or lose in this subject.
In many cases, the reasons are different. For example, in my judgment, please, my reading of the position of the WCC, because the influence of the global South, the churches from the global South is so important there. For the global South, this war almost doesn't exist. Or if it exists, they have their own conspiracy theory about this war. They believe that this is the evil West tries to indeed to inflict, to restrict Russia, and started this war against Russia. So Russia is the victim in the eyes of many in the global South. And this affects the way how the churches perceive this war. And this affects the way how the churches influence the WCC to perceive this war. So conspiracy theories, inability to understand the nature of this war, lead many churches to keep silent or to produce inconsistent or unacceptable statements about the war.
Yeah, I also believe that Europe and United States are pushing Russia. It's normally to be so. They are colonizing countries. They are imperialist. But Russia should act with the mind, not with the gun. This is my opinion. So if you see that something is pushing you, you must use your brain economically, politically, diplomatically, invent new things, develop industry, and so on, and to fight in this direction, not using crime to resolve your
I see only
problems.
one colonizing power. It's Russia trying to colonize other countries.
Of course, for sure. Now, because Russia used the war in this instance, it is clear that which are its direction. Now, I think that we covered much part of this subject related to fundamentalism. It is possible to address to you one or two questions outside of this subject, out of topic?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah.
We still have like 10 minutes or so.
Okay, is Russian Orthodox Church involved in ecumenism? I ask this because you know that you are a professor of ecumenism and you know you have information about this.
Yes, Russia, the Russian Orthodox Church has been involved in the ecumenical movement formally since the 60s. When in 1961, the Russian Church joined the World Council of Churches, for example, at the General Assembly of the World Council of Churches in New Delhi, in India. And the Russian Church has continued since then, being involved in different ecumenical movements and dialogues. In the Soviet Union, for the Russian Church, it was an instrument to neutralize, at least a bit, the pressure of the Soviet state upon the Church. Since then, the ecumenical movement has been an instrument for the Russian Church. Nowadays, the purpose of instrumentalization has changed. Now, the purpose why the Russian Church is still interested in the ecumenical movement. It's not ecumenical movement per se. There are, I think, I don't know really very many sincere ecumenists in the Russian Church, Russian Orthodox Church, but there are some professional ecumenists who know how to instrumentalize and how to manipulate the ecumenical movement. As I said, in the Soviet time, the manipulation was directed at helping the church to survive in the Soviet Union, as I said, to neutralize the pressure, to lighten the pressure of the Soviet regime upon the church. Now, the church tries to help the state, the Kremlin, to carry out its goals globally, and the church instrumentalizes, uses the ecumenical movement to a great extent for that goal. I would say that Putin learned how to manipulate all noble causes, including anti-colonialism, including peacemaking process, including human rights. When it serves him, he uses all these instruments, international instruments, to help his cause. The Russian Church helps Putin in this. The Russian Church also instrumentalizes noble causes such as ecumenism to the ends of Putin's regime. Therefore, I think we can speak about instrumentalization of ecumenism in Russia and by the Russian Orthodox Church globally. Russia also instrumentalizes inter-Orthodox relations and tries to use them to help the Kremlin in pursuing its goals. So we are talking about, yes, and also it should be said that such an instrumentalization leads eventually to the distrust and destruction of these good causes. So that, for example, the credibility of the WCC, which was kind of abused by the Russian Church, has fallen significantly, has been damaged. The credibility of the global ecumenical movement to a great extent has been discredited as well because of this instrumentalization of this global ecumenical movement by the Russian Orthodox Church. So unfortunately, I think we are facing quite a crisis in the ecumenical movement, the same sort of crisis that happened as a result of the World War II. We may have an impression that the ecumenical movement started like with the establishment of the WCC in 1948 in Amsterdam, but the ecumenical movement existed at least half a century actively before that. It just went into a crisis during the World War II and had to be reinvented as a result of the World War II. I usually advocate the point that the ecumenical movement gets advocated with every major war which happens in the world, especially in Europe. And probably we are facing the same situation when the ecumenical movement has to be reinvented again.
Yeah, interesting. So, in conclusion of this answer, it is possible for a church to use the ecumenical movement for personal gains, interest, or
Well,
instrumentalization.
most churches do so, I would say.
Yeah.
Even, well, the Orthodox churches usually they are participating in the ecumenical movement to get something from it, which is probably understandable. Well, many churches participate in ecumenical movement and to get, for example, some sort of resources, access to resources. If you take, for example, the churches in Africa or elsewhere in the in the developed world, it's normal to expect something, from the movement. The thing is that you cannot. It's a shame, it's a crime to instrumentalize it in order to make it unusable for others. Something that the Russian church is doing.
Yeah, I ask this because I have some friends who are participating in the different ecumenical movements, and they say that they are going there to be an example for others. Yeah. Okay. And the last question.
That is the ideal situation.
This is the ideal. Every church is involved to be an example for the other. The last question is about you, for people to know you more, but you may answer or not answer to this question. Is in regard to your canonical trial. What happened? Why was this trial? How it finished? But again, only if you want to
Well,
answer
I
to
will
this
respond
question.
briefly because I had so many instances, so many opportunities to explain it already because, well, it's quite, yes, it has become quite big.
Oh, we don't know here in Romania.
Briefly
That's why I
speaking,
ask.
briefly speaking, I say that, well, the pretext for my punishment by the Russian Orthodox Church was my concelebration with the Ecumenical Patriarchy. And I think it's, of course, it's a laughable pretext. It cannot be serious. But the real serious reason for this punishment is, of course, my critique towards the policies of the Russian Orthodox Church, particularly in relation to the war in Ukraine. Well, this punishment is overdue. I expected it to happen earlier, but it happened when it happened. Of course, it doesn't affect my service, my life. Moreover, it encourages me to speak up even more than I did. And so if they wanted to silence me, they achieved just the opposite by punishing.
Okay, thank you again, Professor Ovorun, for everything what you said for us. I think will be enlightening for a lot of people in Romania. And I don't know, may we keep in touch for another different discussions?
Very well, yes. Have a good day and every success in your evangelizing work.